Hello, and welcome to the KubeBuilder Controller Runtime and Controller Tools meeting for Thursday, March 25th, 2021. As a reminder, this is being recorded, so don't say anything you don't want recorded for all posterity and uploaded to YouTube. All right, so looks like we have a few things on the agenda today. I believe the first is a proposal for filtered list watches. So if the author is there, do you want to take us away?
Hi, hello. Yes, I'm here. I don't know, I share the screen with the PR, with the design document. I can talk about it. I don't know how to follow.
Yeah, if you just want to talk about it, maybe give us a brief summary for people who haven't read it, and then maybe we can do some discussion if there's sufficient quantity of people who have read it and have opinions.
Okay, there. So, I'm a member of KubeBuilder network team, and we are using controller runtime in a tool that is deployed as diamond sets, and we reconcile on node resources. So in a big clusters, we found that the CPU and the memory on masters was increasing like a lot. So we discovered that control runtime was transferring all the nodes to all the workers like every few minutes, because the node resource changes a lot. Because some annotation get added there, because for example in KubeBuilder every few minutes we annotate the node with some information. So it's like, say, a very lively resource, not the nodes. So we discovered that we need to reconcile only the node where the pod was running on. So for us, if we were able to filter the list watch or select the list watch just for the node the pod was running on, was good enough for us. So we, after an idea from Álvaro Alemán, we hacked the cache and add a selector to the list watch for the field name, and it totally remove our problems. So then we decide, okay, let's try to see if we can put something upstream at controller runtime, because looks like there is an issue open there with something similar. Maybe it's not exactly that, but something similar. So I end up creating a PR with a prototype and a design document that is quite simple. What it does is just it traverses the cache implementation with some cache options, and those cache options there are a pair of selectors per resource, a field selector and label selector. And at the end, what it does is they just end up on the list watch as part of the list options, and that's all. And of course, it has some drawbacks, like if you do so, the client is going to return 404 if you try to get something that is not that it has been filtered out by the selector. So but we have keep it like you have to overwrite the cache. Even in the IP of the design document, you have to overwrite the cache in case you want this functionality, like saying you know what you are doing. It's not like a clean option in the builder or a clean option in the manager option. It's something like kind of hide builder inside the cache package to override the cache. So users that use that, they will know that they are doing this and they have to know the consequences. So that's it, more or less.
Great. Has anybody else taken a look at this proposal? I was looking at it before the meeting a bit.
Yeah, so I've been reviewing it a bit and provided a bit of input. So to provide some historic background on the question on why we never had anything for the filtering, it's basically that we couldn't get to the point of finding a solution where we are happy with how the client copes with this. Because as mentioned, if you change the cache, the client won't be able to give you back anything that gets filtered out, which means that this is a bit of a foot gun. The kind of middle ground this concrete proposal would provide is that it adds the functionality just to the cache and then allows people to override the new cache func in the manager, which is already possible today. And if you do that, you're essentially saying you know better than the default. So this would both give a possibility to do this, albeit a bit hidden, and not increase the foot shoot potential. So yeah, I would really like to see this.
Well, I was entertaining an idea and I don't know if it's quite crazy. Like, I don't know if it makes sense to create even a wrapper that in case it's not found in the cache or something, it use directly the, how control runtime call it, API reader client or something like that. So you are going to find it, but you will have to pay the price of direct access to the masters or something. I don't know if it makes any sense.
I think
yeah. Go ahead, Saldi.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think that's probably, I think that would be very surprising to me, to get kind of an inconsistent usage pattern. I think this, as it stands, is probably like obvious enough, quote unquote, that something weird is going on, that it's probably at the very least a good first step. Is that, what were you gonna say, Alvaro?
Yeah, something along the similar lines, that it's surprising that it might cause issue with rate limiting and so on. So I would prefer not to fall back to directly asking the API server.
I think the main comment I'd have on the design document is, I would say, like, maybe just if you could drop a little section at the end there about like just like why we're not doing something more complicated or whatever, just like a little bit of background of, we had a long debate here, like this is kind of the minimal case, and this doesn't raise the questions of like, how does the client interact, or if we move it off onto a per controller basis, then we have to deal with like, how do multiple controllers with different filters work? So by just doing it here, we kind of sidestep all of that, and it's a little bit less ergonomic or magical, but it sidesteps a lot of the long running questions. And we could always tackle those later if we want to, but like, yeah, I think just having a section of like, hey, we're sidestepping all these problems for now with this, and that's why this is the shape it is, would be useful.
Okay, I will add it.
Does anybody have anything else that they'd like to add, or are we good to move on? I will.
Just one quick use case question that just occurred to me. Does this is not necessarily the intent of this. Would this feature open the door theoretically to like controller sharding? Like there's, been a handful of use cases of controllers that are trying to reconcile a tremendous number of resources. Or especially as we get into like multiple cluster, watching multiple clusters, that kind of stuff. I wonder if this opens the door to like, okay, now I could have two controllers synced side by side and each of them are like filtering out half of the world kind of stuff. Is that at all a sane use case, or is that possible through this, do you think?
Well, as I see, the cache is per manager. So you cannot specify per controller.
Oh, sure.
No,
But
sorry. Yeah, sorry. That is what I meant. I was using the word controller less in the controller runtime sense and more in the like
Okay.
Kubernetes pod sense. So yeah, we could have like two pods running the same container that's one of these managers.
I think theoretically you can do that. Yeah. It would be neat to have a more comprehensive design for sharding at some point. But I think that might be a ways off. But yeah, I think theoretically you could use this as a building block.
Cool. Yeah, I would probably not suggest trying to complicate the immediate proposal with that, but interesting to keep in mind.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Alvaro, I think you have the next item.
Yes, I was wondering about maybe adding a variation of our client that on top of what you already have has the watch functionality. The background for that is explicitly not controllers, since controllers are supposed to just use the cache-backed client, but CLIs. This came up because we have a CLI that is used a lot and does a lot, and this ended up causing load issues. So we got asked to not poll, but watch in the CLI. And this is something our client doesn't support at all and isn't needed for controllers either. I ended up implementing this downstream, which works just fine, but it has to duplicate a bunch of private unexported code from our client. So yeah, I was thinking, what about maybe adding a client with watch interface that has this on top of what we already have, but not changing the existing interface and keeping the existing interface everywhere where we already have it, like the manager and so on.
Yeah, I think that probably seems reasonable. Just I would make it very clear in the docs that like, hey, this is like, you probably don't need this in normal use, but I think that seems reasonable. Yeah, especially for the CLI use cases. And it can be useful like when writing little debugging scripts and stuff as well. Yeah, I find myself using controller runtimes client for like little test cases and trying to figure out what's going on with an API server a lot. So yeah, I think it would be useful there too.
Cool, thanks.
All right. The next one looks like it's about our metrics support.
Yes, hi, this is Suhani. I work with an operator that brings in controller runtime, and this operator works with clusters at scale. So recently we observed that one metric, it's called REST client latency duration metric. It ate up a significant portion of Prometheus. I do have reservations about the cardinality of this metric, but for now, I was wondering if we can find a way to disable this metric.
So probably, oh, it's if it's deprecated and turned off, that is probably worth us doing that ourselves.
Sorry, the problem was that I looked into it. It was deprecated and then turned off because it was renamed.
Oh, okay. Is it in upstream? I know like a while ago, upstream made a bunch of changes to cardinality to kind of try to fix some of this kind of stuff. Is this one of the metrics that has changes, and correspondingly, do we need to fill around with our own definition? I guess that's kind of my long-term question. The short-term question for turning it off, are you looking for like a change in controller runtime, or just like, is there, I'm not sure off the top of my head if there's a good way in Prometheus to like say don't export this metric on a per controller basis or whatever. Does anyone know that off the top of their heads?
I think you can add a rule to drop certain metrics, but well, I don't think you should ever have this metric because the cardinality is just so high. It includes the object name. So in my opinion, the question is more if we need to replace it with something or if we can just turn it off entirely, not if we can keep it.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. I kind of meant in the client. I wonder if there's anything client side, like if you have a registry to not export certain things, just as a quick patch, that might actually be useful to have as a note in our documentation if that's possible. But yeah, I think I'm curious to hear. So I'm curious to see what upstream does, I think would be the follow-up question I'd have. I think it's a reasonable assertion that this is potentially very, very high cardinality and we shouldn't have it. I know upstream tackled some of that recently, so I would be curious to hear what they did, because they found a way of they ended up reducing a lot of the cardinality of some of these things. So
I think in our case, I work with Suhani. In our case, it was primarily caused by the fact that the server that you're talking to is included as one of the labels, and we talked to a lot of servers, and that was where it fell over for us. I would also mention. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry, that makes sense.
We also have. We implemented a metric like this ourselves, not knowing that this existed. And so it is possible to do this yourself if we wanted to make the case that maybe it shouldn't be in controller runtime, and you can do it yourself if you need to. It's not easy. It was a little complicated, but it was possible.
Yeah. So I feel like I don't have enough information off the top of my head to just say like let's remove it or let's not remove it. But I am definitely sympathetic to the issue. I'd say maybe if we can follow up on the issue after the meeting with I guess either figuring out a good way to disable certain metrics, or something like that. I don't want to drop this metric, just like drop it in a release, because I think that would kind of suck for people who are relying on it. So seeing if we can figure out a way to let you filter out certain metrics, or if there already is a mechanism client side, and if not, maybe figuring out a deprecation plan and a short-term plan would be a good idea. Does that seem reasonable to y'all?
Yeah, it seems pretty helpful. Sorry, I was looking at upstream as well. It doesn't look like they've made much changes of it as it pertains to this metric, but let's talk more and find a solution to this. Thank you.
All right. Okay. I think the next few are from Adirio. Is Adirio here? Looks.
I don't think so.
Yeah, looks like not.
For some reason, he's not today.
Okay, we can we'll move these to the next one. Yes. All right. So the next one is generate embedded object meta in the CRDs.
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Daniel Cosdivier. I work on a couple of operators, mainly MinIO operator, which is object storage. And this PR introduces the capacity to generate embedded object meta. Right now, it's actually skipped because it causes some problems with the kubectl with the Kubernetes API. But there's some fields that are actually valuable to keep in place, especially because if you, for example, our operator has a volume claim template, right? And to reuse that, we just declare, okay, we're going to reuse this volume claim template from stateful sets. But when the generated CRD does not include the object meta, this allows us to, for example, have fields such as annotations and labels, which are valuable to push down because some CSI drivers rely on those annotations to decide what to do with the volumes. That's mainly the use case that we saw that, okay, we definitely need to have on the generated CRD annotations and labels, right? We were actually patching our generated CRD. And then we thought, okay, why don't we improve the generated CRD tool to actually keep it in place? But we understand that there's some fields that cause problems. I mentioned them on the PR, right? So definitely I skipped some of the fields that are problematic and only kept the fields that make sense to keep on the object meta to be able to push them down, right? So this PR is mostly doing that, right? So as a note of caution, it used to be a specific case in the code, in the CRD generation case, that it was specifically ignoring object meta, right? It was just keeping all the fields on object meta. Because probably someone already found that some of those fields cause trouble. So for this PR, I already kind of like tested, and I saw there was already plenty of conversations, right, on the issues. I also listed those on the PR, and I took all the feedback. And I think you saw were trying to say someone said a PR, but then you said, can you put a feature flag to turn it on and off? So I even put it like that. So that's what this PR is about.
So this is about intermediate object meta, right? Like not the top level one.
Exactly. Yes. This is for when the CRD has some intermediate object meta in its description. In our case, in our operator, for example, it's the volume claim template that we need the object meta to still there, right? Because that metadata gives the PVC some extra attributes, such as labels and annotations mostly.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. Let me. Is this just okay? Yeah, we've been going back and forth for a while on this.
Yeah, so I built this PR in late January because we were like patching the generated CRD, and I think there's some other users kind of like asking, can we have the object meta remains? Because via customize, you could pretty much also patch it, right? But then it's just some extra steps, and I think there's some useful. So even as a feature flag, right? Right now it's introduced as disabled, so no one will notice the change unless they explicitly ask for it, passing the generate embedded object meta flag. And now they could actually make it so their CRDs, if they have the need for the embedded meta, they could actually be generated on controller. So if the flag, which by default is off, is not even present or not mentioned, no behavior will change. No one will notice this has been added.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm long term, I'm not sure how I feel about a hard-coded list of fields, but I also acknowledge that I'm not entirely certain that there is a better option. Because the full list of fields causes a ginormous expansion.
Yes, that I agree, and that's a separate problem that the PR on the right side will mention, or the next PR, I mean. But yes, it does increase a little bit the size of the CRD, and there's kind of like a hard limit on the size of the CRD to like 256K, I think. So that's why it's optional, right? It's like an opt-in kind of thing. Like if you really need it, then you should know how much your own generated CRD is going to actually be growing. But then again, the whole point is that only people who need it is actually going to come looking for this flag, and it's like, okay, I noticed my object meta is missing. Oh, there's a flag to make sure it gets generated. And that's pretty much it.
All right, yeah. I think this seems fine. Honestly, we might want to turn this on by default.
Okay.
But yeah, otherwise, I think this seems fine. The only immediate comment I would say is, actually, I need to double check to see if it's there. I thought I didn't see it. Yeah, I would maybe link to the comment from Stefan in the code comments. Stefan SDTS in the comment by the list of fields that we allow, just so that in case someone comes upon it like a year in the future and they're like, why this specific list of fields? We can say, well, someone from API Machinery told us this was the list of fields to use. And then we can, reevaluate that later or go blame them as necessary.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I can add that in the comments. You mean in the comments, kind of like when we turn on when we offer the flag, or?
Or I meant just like the code comment, like this is an allow list of properties that are of properties of object meta, just like in the package CRD known types file.
Okay. Sure. I can add that, but yeah, I wanted to bring this PR to everyone's attention. I said it end of January, so I wasn't getting much love on the PR, so I wanted some feedback to see if anyone. But I can definitely add those comments on how we came up with this list of fields.
Yeah, apologies for the review latency. My review latency has been kind of terrible recently.
It's fine, actually. I think I sent a mail to the mailing list and someone replied with an invitation to these meetings. So I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I should go to those meetings. All right.
All right. And I think it looks like you have the last one as well.
Yes, I sent another PR, which adds another feature flag. Or how to call it, a marker, sorry. So this marker is to add support for deprecation. Right now, if you have multiple versions in a CRD, version 1, version 2, version 3, and the official definition has a field for marking a version as deprecated. So this one pretty much does that, right? So if you pass this marker on a version of your CRD, as it's getting built, the deprecated warning is going to actually be going to be put, and you can also pass a deprecate message. That's also specified there in the marker as warning. So you can pretty much push them down to your generated CRD. This is useful for when you have, again, you're evolving the versions of your CRD and you're already in version 2, version 3, and perhaps you want to deprecate version 1. That's one way that you can push, turn on this feature. Again, optionally, alternatively, you can always manually add this to the generated CRD. This is just making it so it's two controller tools.
Yeah, no, this seems good. We should, if there's an equivalent fields in the CRD, we should have that. This seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah, and I think these are the two items I wanted to bring to this meeting. If anyone has any questions or feedback, please let me know.
Seems that no one has any question. I was late to the meeting, so my 2 points were skipped, but if you are fine, we can go through them now if there is no other point raised. I
Oh, yeah.
was commuting to work, sorry.
No worries. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the first one was related to providing the documentation of KubeBuilder in other languages. There is a pull request that has been there for some months and it's actually outdated. So from the Chinese community that wants to merge it to provide the documentation also in Chinese. And I think we don't have any example of how we want to treat them or how this should be considered. Probably we need to provide a domain which will be used for that language, and also we will probably want to describe how we want the process to be. For example, maybe whenever a merge is done against book versus 3, it should also be merged versus against these other branches, and then the communities that are in charge of translating them be notified and translate the additional parts or things like that. And I think that we haven't decided anything in this sense, so it would be nice to discuss that so that we have a common proceeding for all this. Maybe in the future we also have in other languages like Spanish or Italian or I don't know. So I think we should actually define how we want to treat that.
Yeah, I think the original reason I had held off on making any decisions is because I wanted to get like a review from an official like SIGDocs reviewer on, because I think they have reviewers that can just like go through and like give a quick scan to make sure everything is reasonable in different languages. They never got back to me. So I think, yeah, I think probably just let's write down what you just said in like a little document about how we do our internationalization. I can create the subdomains and stuff, and we can have different subdomains. Actually, I should see if there's infrastructure in MDBook, or someone else can see it if there's infrastructure for internationalization in MDBook already. Because if there is, then having a little language selector or whatever would be nice. But and then if someone here, or if we can maybe put out a call, if someone can show up to a SIGDocs meeting or try to poke SIGDocs again and see like, hey, is there a good way for us to get reviews? Because like the main thing I'm concerned about is like, you know, I can't do reviews in Chinese for doc reviews, and so it would be great to have just like someone that we could trust that could just be like, hey, these generally look reasonable. Yeah. For any given language we want to support, whether it's, you know, Chinese or Spanish or Italian or whatever.
We have one pair for the Chinese stuff, but I cannot review Chinese as well. But the biggest problem is because it's not showing the preview. I think it has something broken the chains as well. So maybe if we can just provide how they can do that, because now I doesn't know if that PRs we can move for January. This is what I'd like to say. So if someone started to spend time trying to review that, maybe, you know, we'll lose the time.
Yeah, so I think maybe the follow-up from this meeting is we should put together a little a PR in the repo under our documentation instructions of like what the process is for internationalization of our docs,
Yeah.
and how we're going to do it and what people can expect, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, sounds reasonable.
Sure.
And asking for a review for any language that we don't know ourselves from SIG docs should be added there too. For example, I can review the Spanish version, so we won't need that for the Spanish one, but probably in other languages, not only Chinese, we will need some help in that sense to make sure that we are not insulting anyone or things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my initial idea was like put English official because it's the language that we have the maintainers that everybody can check, and the other like not official, something like that, just to clarify that we don't have any responsibility. And then if you will not be able to get help from specific teams, you know, just to let they push the chains. I hope you'll be very rare. Someone put some very bad there. I doesn't know. But
I mean, I've been told that SIG docs does have like official teams for this. So, you know, if we can convince them to come to our repo, nominally this should be something that's nominally covered by those groups in SIG docs. So I think we
that's
just need to
nice.
figure out how to.
Having a separate branch per language and merging there every time we merge into book B3 also sounds reasonable, and then committing just to that branch the changes in that language. I don't know how hard will be to resolve the merges once the Chinese branch has an additional commit with the Chinese documentation, and we want to merge the additional documentation that was created in English so that the Chinese also has it, and then they have to commit again to translate that. I don't know how hard will be to resolve those merge conflicts.
I'm curious. I'm curious to see. I don't know what Upstream does in terms of this workflow. I'd be curious to hear what they do as well.
Yeah, maybe try to look for a better solution. Maybe it can be a follow-up as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was one of the points, and the other point that I raised, I don't know if anyone has any other concern about this or. Okay, so the second point that I raised was about the version 3 stable. I think we have merged everything that we considered blocking for version 3, and we already have a beta 1, the second beta of this release. So I think that we should like define and schedule or a calendar where we are going to release version 3. Maybe, I don't know if we want to release a release candidate first or directly version 3. I don't know if it's going to be in 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, or a year. I don't know, but I think we should try to make a calendar to follow those steps.
About the version 3, what do you think about releasing more one beta after next week, and then after that the stable one? Because it has a few details that I saw just that it maybe would be better before, but it's small things. Of course, it's not mandatory, but it would be nice.
Yeah, we could do a beta or we could do a release candidate. I mean, if that is the release candidate, if we think that's going to be the release candidate, then we might as well just do it as like -rc.0. But yeah, we could do one more pre-release release. That's fine, I think.
Okay, sounds fine. We can like try to schedule the next release candidate for next Thursday in a week time, and in the next KubeBuilder meeting in 2 weeks, make the final release if everything went the right way.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Can be less as well, I think 1 week after. I doesn't know.
Do we want to try to do the release candidate today, actually, and just to give people 2 weeks?
It's all day. I prefer next week because it has just a few changes that I think would be nice to get merged before. Just for we be sure. Small things. And then yes. Can be on
Okay.
Monday.
Maybe on Monday. Yeah.
Yeah, Monday seems fine. I just want to give people like 1 week to 2 weeks, two-ish weeks to test is probably a more reasonable release candidate duration than just 1 week.
Okay, sounds good to me.
All right. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to talk about today? Sounds like not. All right, so I will see y'all in a couple weeks.
Really, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.